Emma's the Beacon Partnership Manager at Restored. It's a Christian charity that seeks to end domestic abuse through speaking up, equipping the church, and supporting survivors. Emma is a practicing psychotherapist and was a church leader for 14 years, involved in creating community and making Jesus known in new spaces. She also developed local initiatives that sought to end violence against women and girls and supported those who had been subjected to abuse. While recognizing the injustice that can come through local church, her experiences are testament to the transformational impact of community on individuals as she remains hopeful about the restoration that can be found. We're very pleased to welcome her. Emma, over to you.
Thanks so much, Nikki. It really is great to be with you all. I'm going to do that beautiful thing of just making my slides available to everybody. There we go. I think that's worked full time. First time. Yep. Wonderful. Well, as Nikki's already said, at Restored, we have a vision to see a world where women are free from violence. And we do that in three ways. We speak up wherever we're given the opportunity to do so. We really equip the church through our training and through our Restored Beacon initiative. And we support individuals as they navigate the complex systems of that intersection of faith and of abuse. And I guess the reason we want to do that, and what I want to share today, is that the Bible has something to say about it. That actually we, as Christians, want to do something and to be part of that changing the story. And so I just want to share with you this story from Judges 19. It's probably a story that you may not have heard preached about in your churches or in your settings. It's certainly not in the children's Bibles. But it's a story that's set in the time of Judges in a place called Gilead, which is modern day Jordan. And it's also associated with the Handmaid's Tale, that word Gilead. Some of you may know the book or indeed the Netflix series that's come on from that. But in the whole of this book of Judges, there's this refrain that Israel had no king. And as we go from the beginning right through to the end, we see that the treatment of women appears to get worse and worse. And then it kind of ends with this almost pinnacle story at the end of Judges. And the very last verse says these words: everyone who saw it was saying to one another, such a thing has never seen or done, not since the day the Israelites came out of Egypt. Just imagine, we must do something, so speak up. And that's really, I guess, what I want us all to take away from today, but also I think for us at Restored, how we kind of feel when we're thinking about responding to gender-based violence. And so we just go back to the beginning of the story in Judges 19. And in the first few verses of Judges 19, we see that there's a concubine who has left her husband and returned to her father. And there's a couple of things that are significant about this fact. The first is that concubines had no rights. And so they would have known that there would have been severe consequences for leaving their husband and returning to her father. But we also know that the concubine felt able to return to her father, something that wouldn't ordinarily have been done. Once somebody had left the family, it was very unlikely that they would return. And then the last thing that's significant is that the father didn't immediately return her back to her husband. But in fact, if we move on a few verses, we see that the father persuades the husband to stay on for a few days and not return home. Now, the text doesn't tell us anything more, but I wonder whether what that woman had said to her father enabled him and her to convince him that she should stay. And not only that she should stay, but that he should try and keep her there longer. Could she have been scared, perhaps, to return? Perhaps the father feared for her safety and was doing all that he could to keep her safe. But eventually, the father can persuade no more, and the two leave and head towards home. As we go through the chapter, we find that there was a long journey. And so the husband wanted to stay in a city, and they arrive at Gilead late in the afternoon. And it was customary at that time for visitors to stand in the square of the village to wait for somebody who would offer them hospitality. Eventually, a man on his way home does just that and opens up his home for the couple to go and stay in and be safe for the evening. There's a little phrase that makes us wonder that perhaps whether he's aware of other things that are going on in that city. And so he's fairly insistent that they don't remain outside, but they go back to his home. And then we come to the part of the story where perhaps if it was made into a film like The Handmaid's Tale, there would be that tense music and maybe a little bit more intense lighting as well. And it would make us stop and take a breath. And it should make us stop and take a breath. Because while they're indoors enjoying food with their host, there's a loud bang on the door and some men from the city come and demand that the host sends out the visitor so that they can have sex with him. Just imagine how the people indoors would have been feeling. Perhaps they would have been pleased that their host was standing up to them and saying no. He wasn't going to allow that to happen. But then the host turns and says, "Have my daughter and this man's concubine instead." And just imagine for a moment what those women must have been feeling. When the men outside wouldn't listen, before the host can say anything more, the husband opens the door and pushes his concubine out. The Bible says she's raped and abused all night, and then in the early morning stumbles back to her host's door and lies there with her hands just on the threshold. We might think, can it get any worse? But it does. The story goes on to tell us that the husband comes out the door demanding her to get up, and on discovering that she can't, hoists her up and put her over his donkey to set off for home. We don't know at what point she dies, but on returning home, the man cuts up her body into 12 parts and sends a different part to each of the 12 tribes. In those days, Israel had no king. All the people did whatever seemed right in their eyes. Such a thing has never been seen or done. Just imagine. We must do something. That phrase, Israel had no king, is more than just a historical placeholder. It's a challenge about who the people of God are choosing to be in relationship with. But perhaps we might still ask ourselves, what does this have to do with us now? The truth is, this is a story that it's very easy to separate ourselves from. We might think, well, they were ancient times, things were different. But I wonder what has changed. And just reading and listening to those reflections that were shared with us just a few moments ago, what differences do we really see in our world today? As you're here because you already know that gender-based violence is a real concern and a live issue that many of us want to be able to respond to and do something about. We know that through some research from the University of Chester that the church isn't always equipped to respond well and safely to disclosures of abuse. We don't have to look far in the press to read about violence towards women and girls being on the rise. But why is this? It's a big question, but psychologist Lundy Bancroft talks about the cause of domestic abuse being like a tree. The roots are a belief of ownership, the trunk a feeling of entitlement, and the branches being power and control. But we also know about a tree, right? We read in Matthew 7 that Jesus said, "Just as you can identify a tree by its fruit, so you can identify people by their actions." What are our beliefs about human relationships? And how is this reflected in our behaviours? What is the soil in which we are planted in? So what can we do? Well, we can be aware of the doctrines and teaching we have within the church and recognise when we need to work harder to explicitly say they are not a reason or excuse for abuse. We can equip those within our congregations to challenge comments or phrases that seek to dehumanise women in their everyday life. We can enable our children and young people to recognise healthy relationships. It can feel too big sometimes, too much. Where do we even start? But it starts with us noticing, finding confidence to challenge, and then choosing to comment and respond differently. Everyone who saw it was saying to one another, such a thing has never been seen or done, not since the day the Israelites came up out of Egypt. Just imagine, we must do something, so speak up. At Restored, we have the beautiful opportunity of journeying with and responding to over 750 women who have all been subjected to domestic abuse. And we have the opportunity to share with them and hear from them their story, but also enable them to connect with one another and find others who can journey with them with that greater understanding. We know that sadly, the vast majority of those women did not have good experiences when they disclosed their abuse within their church context. And so if you'd like to be part of what we do at Restored, we have a vision of churches all around the UK and Ireland who want to join us in changing that story for individuals who have been subjected to domestic abuse. And this network really is a network. It's about joining together. As a church leader, I often felt isolated responding to domestic abuse because my denomination didn't necessarily understand. But then I also felt a little bit out of it. While I had amazing opportunity to work with statutory agencies, they didn't necessarily understand the barriers that were in place for those who had a faith. And so this network, supported by Restored, really can work together to respond to the refrain. Just think, we must do something and change the story. Just some little prompts to leave you with for all of us. And this is a challenge to me as much as it is to anybody else. But we need to notice and then challenge. You might want to sign up to some training. Safe in Faith do an amazing training for clergy and for church leaders. And we at Restored also offer 3 different levels. Share resources, talk to one another. Let's not feel like this is in isolation. And then pray. Let's journey together and pray for one another, as well as for those individuals we seek to support. Thank you.